Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some Toronto Raptors news, Riker. The season's over, one of the toughest seasons, certainly the worst season in terms of the Raptors Digest history, in terms of the Raptors being good. It's over, it's complete, it's done, and we're already starting the news, the rumors, they're amping up, and a big part of it has Masai Ujiri and the players having their exit interviews. Masai Ujiri gave a 45-minute interview to end off the season, explaining everything from his free agency to the Raptors players to tanking this year. Riker, obviously Masai Ujiri is the biggest free agent, arguably in Raptors history this summer. So you probably make the argument it's Kawhi or Bosh or one of those guys. But
very much would make the argument it was Kawhi, but I love your energy.
yeah, but we'll start it off. How important is it to re-sign Masai Ujiri before we break down his comments?
Well, you could make the argument as well that we are now entering a period, or you could treat Masai's free agency similarly to Gary Trent Jr.'s free agency. We said, oh, slow your roll there. Biggest plus minus in NBA history, a game winner, a bunch of records that Gary Trent Jr. came in and set. We said we might have to pay this guy a ton. Masai Ujiri, who was the 4D chess master and putting together teams and making trades out of nowhere, then really came back to reality. And a lot of people, including myself at times, were questioning Masai Ujiri's ability to manage a franchise without a superstar caliber player on it. So, Ben, I see the eyes that you're giving me right now. I'm saying we're about to buy low on Masai, which is optimal, but obviously it doesn't affect the cap space the same way that a player would. But I'm not satisfied with the job that he did, but he was also self-critical and self-reflective in the interview that he gave.
Yep, certainly, and we'll just address that point initially. He came out and said he messed up in terms of the roster structure that he brought in this season. He was in a similar boat to what I was in following that Celtics series when we saw that small ball unit, OG Anunoby at center, just bully the Boston Celtics. Unfortunately, they couldn't get it done, but with the Marc Gasol struggles, and I guess Serge Ibaka was fine in the series, but the level that small ball unit was playing, I was confident coming into this year, say, okay, let's run OG at center to close games. Aaron Baines, he'll be fine as a guy. Sure, he can start, but he's not really your closing guy. You don't have to rely upon him. And whether it was, obviously the small ball unit was run at times, and it looked good for stretches, especially when Chris Boucher was integrated into the lineup, but as a whole, it seemed like a failed experiment, and we didn't even run it for the longest time. Aaron Baines, the insurance pylon, we don't know if he'll be back in a Raptors uniform next season. It seems unlikely. He was more than a starting center to start off this year. He was being forced to do a lot of things, almost fill Marc Gasol's shoes, and Masai came out and said, he made a mistake. He didn't get a true big. He was happy with the Kem Birch, the Freddie Gillespie signings mid-season. He thought the team looked a lot better at that point, but obviously the team wasn't put together as constructed or as perfectly constructed coming into the season, especially after losing those two guys. But Riker,
it was poor.
Yeah.
Give it a C- grade. And did you have something you wanted to throw back at me? Because actually, wait, because I want to go at, you said the small ball lineup looked good for stretches. One stretch only, and that was 2 games against the Milwaukee Bucks in which they stole the season series. That was the
and
only
the Sixers. We beat the Sixers with the small ball lineup. Don't be
one game, but then they lost the other game to the Sixers.
It was
the
close,
first time that they played, and it was embarrassing because I was on the Sixers Fanatics or whatever their podcast is. There's a Instagram page. I can't remember their names. Anyways, I was doing an in-game podcast. I hopped on with them, and I was trashing the Sixers, saying how much better the Raptors were going to be this season. And boy, how the tables turn. But Ben, yes, the small ball lineup experiment, it's very matchup based, and there's a lot of large teams in the East particularly, right? And you need to have an interior presence, at least capable on the defensive end, which is what the Raptors lacked for a lot this season. And even bringing in Birch and Gillespie, we were still in a position where you could have competed for the play-in. Now, you and I were saying, well, why bother playing for the play-in? A little bit of the argument said that because it's fun, why not? And we thought, sure, go for it. But logic would prevail. you might as well tank if you're this close to the bottom and you have your core unit locked in. But that being said, I think the Raptors still tried to win a couple games when they initially brought in Birch and Gillespie, and it still made no difference. You can look at injuries, you can look at whatever, but there's still moves to be made there that need to be made. And I think that's another thing that came out of this interview, Ben, was Masai saying we need to put together a better team next season. So he probably will be looking to make moves.
Oh, certainly, and that's a big thing. And not to go straight into the free agency hypotheticals, players we can bring in, trade, because we're going to be doing a lot of that over the next few weeks, Riker. But Masai Ujiri, you said with the struggles, and this is what this is sort of leading into, you said with the struggles, we could potentially be buying low on Masai Ujiri because he has had his worst season as GM, so to speak, coming into this year. You think he'll be buy low, but from that interview, it seems like that will certainly not be the case, and I'm of the opinion it definitely shouldn't be the case because he did bring us a championship. He did do these sorts of things. You're laughing there, but he came out and said, obviously, he brought up the term, people are saying blank check, and yes, he does have 3 kids, he wants to be compensated, he wants to get some things back, but not only is it going to be a significant contract, and we know the Washington Wizards, they're a team that's willing to provide ownership, and Masai Ujiri didn't rule out any other options. He said he was going to be open with the media, open and say that he has to look everything over, as he should, as a free agent, as a guy that's probably the most sought-after GM, I'd argue, across the NBA, especially where Danny Ainge has fallen. R.C. Buford hasn't done much with the Spurs. Masai Ujiri probably would get the most on a completely open market scale, but so certainly he's looking over all of his options. But not only that, Riker, not only that, he has some demands from the MLC, from the ownership of the Toronto Raptors. He wants to ensure that this Toronto Raptors team is going to be competitive, and he didn't trash on them by any means, but he did allude to the fact that if there were reservations, it would factor into his decision. He wants something like when he signed back in 2012, 2013, when they said they'd be committed to bringing an all-star game like we saw in 2016. We saw Drake be a global ambassador, hype up the brand. They'd be willing to go into the luxury tax. The Raptors were willing to make moves to be good, become a legitimate franchise, and now Masai Ujiri wants assurance that this ownership not only will get us to a solid, great franchise, but have us up there with the level of the Lakers, the Knicks, in making us an attractive destination and a winning organization, Riker.
Well, he has to be a part of why it's not like that right now, because it's not like, yes, you did a deal whereby you put at risk the reputation of the franchise by trading away your centerpiece in such a way that he publicly criticized or said that he was backstabbed, right? That's obviously has the potential to come back at you for future free agents. But it's not like that deal ended up giving you a bunch of veterans that you knew you weren't going to re-sign. You brought back one guy. You still had Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka.
Hey, don't forget Danny Green. We got
Danny Green.
In that.
Respectfully, I would say Serge Ibaka was still in his prime. Kawhi Leonard. What happened? You lost every single one of them in free agency. You couldn't re-sign them. You couldn't trade for them. You got zero value back. So while I can respect that, yes, you want to look at the rest of the franchise and say we need to be in a position where we can bring in big guys. Well, hold up a sec. You had a bunch of all-star level talent. I hear some voices on the podcast. Hopefully it doesn't bleed over. But Ben, what I also want to say to your point on why free agency is so important for Masai Ujiri or for the whole entire league is because this is the quintessential mid-market team, Ben, the Toronto Raptors, right? Everybody is looking at the Toronto Raptors team being a treadmill team, having no superstar, losing constantly to the Cavaliers and to LeBron every time they hit the playoffs. And then Masai Ujiri brings a team that no analyst would ever expect to have a finals run, let alone win. Right, that's the pinnacle of being a GM or being president. So I can see why he's going to command the big money. But Ben, final point, moves need to be made, and that's what I'm the most excited about. If he gets re-signed, what moves will be made? Because yes, Aaron Baines didn't pan out, but we both said you should get Aaron Baines. We also said you should get Christian Wood. He missed out on that one. We also said you should re-sign Serge Ibaka. That would have helped this season, but got to move on, got to move past it.
Yeah, well, first, we wanted Wood and Ibaka. That's what you and I wanted, and that would have been the best case scenario. Then, when Serge Ibaka left, we said, okay, well, I think we lost Serge after Wood. But we wanted Wood first and foremost. Then, when we lost Serge, we said, okay, Baines would be solid. So, Baines wasn't the first option by any means. But you brought up a lot of good points there, and obviously, the big thing is Masai Ujiri coming in and making moves. That's why you want to keep him and make sure he makes the right decisions, because for all the criticisms you've brought up, Ryker, would you say, considering, if you just look at the other GMs across the NBA, would you be most confident with Masai Ujiri at the helm rather than someone else, or even a Bobby Webster at the helm?
Yeah, well, I don't want to say the devil because one bad season, one experimental season where ultimately you're have the potential to get a high draft pick and then have the exact same team play it back. Now it's exciting because we'll have potentially a healthy Gary Trent Jr. Right? It's not like he did a terrible job. I feel like I'm bagging on him, but at the same time, I want to run it back with Masai, give him another chance to make a playoff push in a normal year where you're not in Tampa for an entire season with no fans. End of the day, Masai Ujiri is the guy to bring back for sure. No two ways around it.
Yeah, and that's the point why I would bring up, because I don't want to get into the debate with you. We've been in this debate over the course of the season. I think Masai Ujiri is untouchable. I think he's the most important free agent, obviously. From the context of this conversation, people can read out that we've disagreed on that throughout the year, but we're both of the opinion that it's essential the Raptors bring him back. It's key, it's the best move, and from the interview, from everything we broke down, I think what makes it even more important, what makes it even more essential, is because Masai Ujiri is going to get the bag. That's the expectation. That's what's going to happen, right? We knew this going into it, but the fact that he wants the winning culture, he wants the ownership to be on board, that seems like the main decision, unless he wants to become GM of the NBA Africa League. He said other options, maybe government, because he obviously has his hand in many different things and many different interests. So outside of him moving on to something bigger and better for something more worldly, Masai Ujiri is going to stay if the Toronto Raptors are bought in to having a winning organization. That was the context of that. That's really what I got out of his 45-minute interview. And the real important thing is, Ryker, I think if he leaves, that might be an indication that the ownership, especially with the Tampa season where they may have lost a lot of money, right? We've already won a championship. The Raptors have had a history of being a poorly run franchise. If we lose Masai Ujiri, not only are we losing one of the top, in my opinion, the top executive in the NBA, it could also be an indication that ownership isn't completely on board with having a successful team going forward, being all in on winning, maybe being all in on just a middle-of-the-pack team that makes money. I don't know if that's a stretch. Am I reaching here, Ryker? But I think that's something I'm most afraid of about this, losing Masai Ujiri in this offseason.
Well, if you're reading into it that way, I'm reading it into it the other way, that he's almost indicating that the blame for this season is towards ownership or the rest of the management team or scouting or whomever is responsible for decision making. Because again, if I look at who made the decisions in the offseason to make particular signings or not re-sign particular players, i.e. Serge Ibaka, right? To not trade Fred or Kyle Lowry earlier, and maybe they got blindsided by the ultimate final deal that Miami Heat put on the board, which, they ended up trading for Victor Oladipo. That was a bad package. You wouldn't accept that for Kyle Lowry, so I don't fault him. But the first package, like 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline, right? Gary Trent Jr., it's still a bit too early to say if that would be good or bad, but I was a little bit shook at the beginning with that Norm Powell trade. To me, that's all Masai Ujiri's decision-making, and a lot of those things that happened was the reason that the season wasn't conducive to winning. So if I'm looking at him saying, you guys need to commit to a winning franchise, I'm thinking, well, was he not the reason that they weren't a winning franchise this season? So I don't know. It'll be very interesting the way it plays out. But again, same reason that we're not low on Siakam right now. I don't think you should be low on Masai Ujiri, which I don't think many people are. I think you need to have a normalized season, full healthy lineup, no
to
pandemic.
Really cast judgment.
Yeah, you have to.
Yep. No, and I see where you're coming from. I think I disagree with the tone, like saying that's maybe what he's saying, but it's definitely a way to interpret what he's saying. I think he just wants to ensure the Raptors are going to go all out for what they're invested in. But let us know what you guys think. Do you guys think that the Raptors will keep Masai Ujiri? What were your takeaways from that long interview? Masai Ujiri's a great listen when he gets to talk about different things, different topics. He's a really good speaker, so you love to see Masai Ujiri. He's very charismatic. I love the way he deals with the media, but quality listen. Definitely recommend you guys check it out. But let us know what you guys think of all that. You're the best for making this far. And Ryker, we're plugging in here at the end. Courtside Digest, obviously the Raptors. Not a lot of news happening this offseason, but there is a lot of news across the NBA, and Ryker and I are making videos left, right, and center on the Courtside Digest. We're going to record one right after this one here now, so check those out. Got one on DeMar DeRozan to the Knicks. Knicks fan, Ryker, I don't know if you got the hat there, and we got one on the Milwaukee Bucks, Miami Heat coming out after this, so subscribe to Courtside Digest, check it out. But you guys are the best to make this far. I just plugged that, the Twitter, the Instagram, all the cool stuff. Ryker, do you have any last words?
Nope. I was trying to come up with something quick and witty. Didn't have it, though. Cheers.